Okay, after a little technical difficulty, we're going to keep going. The thing that these paranormal things, they are increasingly inviting dark and malicious and wicked entities or spirits to enter, the world much more with a lot less resistance is the issue. Aided by new technology, we're able now, as scientists tell us, to capture verifiable evidence through video footage, high definition pictures and audio in the International Space Station. They're providing legitimate evidence that the strange is going on in the mainstream. It's a demonic presence which has become more open in these last days. What's interesting is that people are going on these little trips to different places where they can find these spirits, and they want to go there and they want to see them and they want to deal with them, and you're inviting a presence that you're not qualified or not able to really do anything about. But this evidence is being provided. We have, I don't know if you've been watching this one particular program, but it's talking about the U.S. Pilots and some of the confrontations they've had with, these different objects in space. You got a jet flying 400 miles an hour. This thing comes up beside it, and they actually have pictures of it. And the guy's sitting there looking at it, and all of a sudden the thing just disappears or goes straight ahead, and he's 100 miles away from that jet in no time. And one of the pilots that came back, he sat down, and he was a guy that actually came up and started the Top Gun school. He and 4 or 5 other guys. And so this guy's been a pilot for years, and he said he estimated that particular object, whatever it was, that it traveled 9,000 miles an hour to get to that space ahead of him that quick, just like that. He went back and did the math and everything, because he knew when he reached that other point. And he said, I don't know what it was, but it was there. I saw it. And he said it disappeared. And he said it's going straight and makes a right turn like this. And then one time he just looked up, some more jet pilots came up, and the thing just shot up straight up and disappeared from them. And there's no way they can understand how it wouldn't tear apart one of our planes to try to do that and move that quickly. The G-forces would literally rip what we have apart. And those are the kind of things that these pilots have verified now that they're seeing. So, yeah, there's presence there. Who is it? Well, UFOs, some people say it's UFO, unidentified flying objects. Well, that's a fair name for something like that if you don't know what it is. But numerous government agencies, including our Department of Defense and NASA, are finding it harder and harder to dismiss the moving evidence. In other words, it's there. And this guy on this program has been, he's a Top Gun pilot, run that school, and he said, this happened. I saw it. And they have a film. One had a film of this object come beside the jet. And they were doing, they could track it by satellite. And it was there. How do you explain it? I don't know. Is it demonic spirit? Could be. Now, in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, you remember when we went through that book recently, chapter 2, verse 5 through 10, it says this: Remember ye not that when I was yet with you, I told you these things, and now you know what withholdeth that he might be revealed in his time. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work. Only he who now letteth will let it until he be taken out of the way. And then shall the wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. Interesting statement for our times that we live in. Wickedness and immorality or other things that we see in our times. Conditions in the world have been getting progressively worse for some time, at least from the 60s until today. And those of us that were old enough to be around in the 60s and see what took place in our culture and our society, we know what was going on and how that the drug culture came in, the drugs, and it changed our whole society. One has said events like 9/11 and the 2008 financial crisis, the Twin Towers being bombed, serve as warnings to the tribulation kingdoms that will have dominance in the end. That was Pete Garcia of Omega, the Omega Letter. And from 2008 until 2016, we saw a tidal wave of immorality and wickedness sweep across our country in the form of federal and often unconstitutional mandates that were made without consulting Congress. And we know that was the Obama administration at that time. It was from the FBI to the IRS to Supreme Court judges and other federal positions, people who should have never served in an appointed office were riding on Obama's coattails. They were appointees of him. The borders were opened by him and anybody could come in. It wasn't just the Hispanics. It was also terrorists from the Middle East and anywhere in the world. It's as if the floodgates had just busted open and anything goes was the idea, which explains why our current administration is finding it so difficult and such resistance in what? In trying to do the right thing. And why is that? Because Satan is behind that. He doesn't want righteousness. He doesn't want people doing right. He does everything he can to tear people apart, literally. Drug culture, whether it's that, whether it's alcohol, whether it's power, money, whatever he can get a person with, that he will do. And his whole point is destruction in the end of that person. Across the levels of our government and even the private sector, we see things happening that we just would not have believed even 5 years ago. The term drain the swamp ignited a hatred and a rebellion in Washington, D.C. like there never has been. It brought out in the open people who were just evil behind the scenes for years. They were controlling this country, both sides of the aisle at times. And they had their little club up there, and here comes a guy that doesn't need them or their power and isn't afraid of them. And we see the resistance to the point of totally ignoring the Constitution. If that isn't a breakdown of this country, I don't know what is. But there is a tidal wave of evil. And it's being held back at this particular point in time by the Holy Spirit and through the church. Now, when he is taken out of the way, he's talking about the Holy Spirit in the church, the influence that he has through the church in this world. Once the church is taken out of here, one has said all hell's going to break loose, and it literally will. In nothing else, President Trump's presidency has finally exposed the rotten underbelly hiding out in the shadows for far too long, one person has said. It exposed it. Why? Because it actually resisted it and wants to do right, and boy, you're not going to go against those folks. They're power people, they say. Well, God's more powerful than anybody or anything, but they've been in the shadows. The power brokers are behind the scenes. They won't expose themselves. But now, their puppets are being exposed left and right in this whole thing that's been going on in our country with this falsely charged impeachment process. And that is why the hatred is there for President Trump and anyone who works with him and anyone who wants to do right. Because Satan is relentless You see how relentless the Democrats are at trying to go after the president? That's how Satan is. He is relentless, and that is him. They're his puppets. They don't even realize it, probably. He'll never cease in his evil efforts. He'll never cease. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1 through 7, Paul said this to Timothy, "This know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come, for men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. From such turn away. For of this sort are they which creep into houses and lead captive silly women laden with sins." You might say silly men too, "led away with the divers lusts, ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth." Is that not a description of our society today? We have such groups, and looking at this immorality, we have the LGBTQ now. They added that Q to it, which is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer. They're proud of that now, so they add that on there. What are the rights that they are striving for? They want all of us to accept them and their perversion as a normal way of life. We're just human like you. We're born this way. No, you're not. It's a learned sin, a learned lifestyle. Participate in it, they get trapped in it, and you notice they always have this rebellious attitude. You say one thing against them and they just go off. That's Satan. They don't understand it. Most of them, I believe. Again, I mentioned last week, you see the white buffalo on license plates, which is a sign for those who want to have relations between men and boys. If that's not in your face, putting it on a license plate, I don't know what is. A California church sold their church building and relocated in a new space where beer is served, and plans are underway to build a brewery where the church services can occur. The pastor said, "We decided to sell the building because for us, a church is a community and a movement." That's Pastor Chris Van Hall, who leads the Greater Purpose Community Church in guess where? Santa Cruz, California. And June was born around that area, and we lived there for many years. It's like Big Sur. It's like Asheville. That's a lot like the communities. And they were on the NBC affiliate. Van Hall's church ended up in a food lounge, complete with several beer offerings, a move that reportedly gained them new followers. I bet it did. The old drunks every day say, "Hey, on Sunday they're having some free beer, let's go." And if they went there and they had to buy it, they probably left the church. And this is what the pastor said. There's nothing in the Bible that says you cannot drink alcohol in a responsible manner. Yeah, but it doesn't say you can drink it in church. The food lounge owner, Andrea Molinauer, whose business is hosting the church, thinks it's a great idea. She said, "Why not serve beer when they're reading the Bible verses?" I thought it was genius, she said. If that isn't in God's face with sin, I don't know what is. And God's not going to put up with it much longer. Why not serve beer while you're reading Bible verses? They're formerly named the Garfield Park Community Church, but the Progressive Disciples of Christ congregation, it says, put the section on Facebook. The website explains that they will embrace you regardless of your faith, personal life choices, race, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, political preference, social status, or economic standing. Whoever you are, they're just going to embrace you. Nothing talking about you got to receive Jesus. We love and value all equally, and a greater purpose community church, and literally means all. Radical love and unity are sacred in our community. Hogwash. That's demonic, it's trash. It's not true. Now, on December 19th, 2019, Lighthouse Trails had this article. The Hallmark Channel caved into the LGBT demands as follows. The following out-of-house news story is posted for informational and research purposes. For the LGBT mob, lesbian ads on the Hallmark Channel are just beginning. By Hans, whatever his last name is, the Federalist of the latest episode of Everybody on the Internet is Angry, the Hallmark Channel found itself caught between a Christian rock and an LGBT hard place. After the network ran a commercial from Online Wedding featuring a lesbian wedding. 1 Million Moms, a division of the American Family Association, voiced its concern, gave Hallmark the opportunity to do the right thing. Hallmark quickly dropped the ad from its schedule, but after complaints from prominent LGBT celebrities and advocacy groups, the rise of Boycott the Hallmark Channel on Twitter, the network reversed its decision, with Hallmark CEO Mike Perry apologizing for the hurt the company had caused. Hallmark will be working with GLAAD to better represent the LGBT community across our portfolio of brands. Caved into it. LGBTQ is a small, population-wise group of people. They have a tremendous amount of money behind them, and you have some so-called celebrities from Hollywood identifying because they are transgender, they are queer, and they are a lesbian, and so they voice their opinion. Another thing that's showing us the decline of morality and doing right in this country is Chick-fil-A. Many in the LGBTQ community are suggesting that Chick-fil-A did recently by agreeing to no longer support groups that discriminate, which includes those that discriminate against the LGBT community. But they say that's not enough to just drop their donations. They are now saying what they should do with their money, telling Chick-fil-A to do with their money, things like double what they gave to Salvation Army and give it to LGBTQ organizations. Let's applaud them for making this major shift in their policy. My understanding is that the original founder of it died, passed away, and now, these kind of things are going on. What about technology in our world today that's going on? We look at technology in and of itself, it's not evil. It serves some really good purposes. However, today, our technological progression is becoming frightening. If you really look into some of these things. Cloud storage, data storage, quantum computing, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, unmanned vehicles, unmanned space missions. The term artificial intelligence presents a collection of software, logic, computing, and philosophical disciplines. The aim is to make computers perform functions once thought to be exclusively human. In other words, such things as perceiving meaning in written or spoken language, learning, recognizing facial expressions, They have lethal unmanned autonomous weapon systems, digital cryptocurrencies, biometrics, digital face recognition. China has a new one where they're able to recognize individuals by the way they walk, how they walk down the street. Despite all of this, the overreaching agenda seems geared specifically towards erasing privacy and connecting everyone to a giant grid, whether they like it or not. How's Satan, the Antichrist, going to control things unless he has these kind of controls in place? Google's new Nest Hub Max is a smart display unit that comes equipped with a 6.5 megapixel facial recognition camera. It identifies you and monitors all your actions inside your own home. And the icing on the cake is that it is not equipped with a physical shutter to forcibly prevent it from monitoring what's happening in your home all the time. The device allows you to check in on what's happening in your home when you're out. Seems like a good idea. Check on your kids when you're not there. And because of its facial recognition capabilities, will detect when you enter the room and provide personalized information to you, such as your day's appointments, weather forecasts, and so on. The camera also enables two-way video calls over Google Duo, and comes loaded with Google Assistants, which has been the focus of a huge number of privacy issues. While all these functions might sound super convenient, which they are, and fun, the privacy issue raised by the camera and audio functionality cannot be overlooked. In other words, it can monitor you when you don't know it's monitoring you. And there are concerns about Google's face recognition. The company has struggled to maintain a good reputation. They have proven, and this is a fact, proven to be biased toward communism and authoritarian ideals, big government control over the population, and have been censored for those who reject the force and the violence inherent in those ideas. Today, the face features are only accessible by Google. But what happens in the future? Letting other apps or services have access. What happens then? And if you have someone like the Antichrist, he's not going to ask for access. He's going to take it. Technology of our day has the ability to track and trace human beings anywhere on the planet. The capability was once considered to be science fiction, but it's a reality. You think you can go places where they can't find you? All your new cars they can track that car anywhere they want to track it. Your phones are trackable. And what they had back years ago of being able to censor things from satellites, now they can pinpoint a person. And we don't know fully the accuracy that they have anymore from satellites. On October 12th, Joint Communication Network for Biometric Databases is being established. Under the One World Government, the military is instructing local police forces how to master the human domain with biometric identification and artificial intelligence analysis of the populations. The human domain means changing information or shaping human behavior. When turned on, our own civilian population, you have the ultimate social engineering event that will transform a society. Does anyone remember that it used to be considered conspiracy theory to warn people about biometric databases? Well, now they're accepted as reality. And we should be looking even further, one has said, down the slippery slope for new signposts indicating even greater plans to track, trace, and database all human beings. In 2018, which is over a year ago now, Forbes uncovered one case that might shock everyone. Over the last 5 years, a secretive surveillance company, founded by a former Israeli intelligence officer, has been quietly building a massive facial recognition database consisting of the faces acquired from the giant social network, YouTube, and countless other websites. People are alarmed. Now, there's something else in technology. There's a guy named Elon Musk. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he's the guy that invented PayPal and a number of other things, actually. Progress is being made by him on a Neuralink. That is in brain-computer interface technology. The New York Times and Bloomberg published information from an earlier briefing, and it's stuff that's straight out of science fiction. Elon Musk-backed company claims a sewing machine-like robot will be able to implant threads deeply into the human brain. The results so far from the testing on lab rats, well, they start with the rats, don't they? Gave up on the monkeys. These rats were implanted with as many as 1,500 electrodes in their brain. Now, rat's brain can't be that big. When everyone should be warned or may not transfer smoothly for work on humans. If it does, Neuralink says its intention for the technology at first is to do things like help amputees, which is good, or restore the ability to see, to talk, and listen, of course, and even for people who are paralyzed to be able to get up and walk. Elon said previously he believes that connecting our brains to computers will eventually be the only way to keep up with the progression of artificial intelligence. We invent artificial intelligence, the only way to keep up is we got to put electrodes in our brain. So while things may start here, the plan is for something much more powerful. One big reveal is that it hopes to begin working on human subjects as soon as the second quarter of next year. And that statement was made in, I think, late 2018 or early 2019. So that would be this coming 2020 year in the second quarter. Another thing here, according to the article, bundles of flexible threads are about 1/4 the diameter of a human hair, implanted using needles to avoid blood vessels on the brain surface. Then the embedded sensors capture information and send it to a receiver on the surface of the skull. From there, it transmits wirelessly to wherever they want to transmit it from your brain. So could somebody know what you're thinking? And could they control things in your brain? Now, another thing. Working toward this whole idea, I think, of world governance more than anything. In July 12th, the UN urges governments to take over water resources and allocations. Someday soon, all of the great and fantastic technology will be at the disposal of just two men. And guess who? The false prophet and the Antichrist. This is not a fairy tale. This is not imagination. In Revelations chapter 13, verse 11, we begin there, and we go through about 18 or something like that. And it says this, "And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb. And he spake as a dragon. He exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth the great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by the sword and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark. And we know what that mark is, on their right hand or in their foreheads. And that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark of the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath an understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. And his number is 666, or 666. That's who's going to control things, and that's where this world is heading. Whether they like it or not, whether they believe it or not. And so many churches say, don't read the book of Revelation, it's just an allegory kind of thing. Can you imagine that? It's one of the most important books. All the books are important in the Bible. Now, in the one world governance, there's the monetary system of this world. Hasbro has released a new, it tells us in this article, a new cashless version of its classic board game Monopoly. They're the ones that have the Monopoly. Designed for the digital age. Hasbro's latest edition of Monopoly's gone. Gone are the paper money, community chess cards. Instead, the board game comes with a voice-controlled artificial intelligence device shaped like a top hat to help control the digital transactions. Countries from around the world have been eager to implement a cashless society, but none have moved as fast as Sweden. Their notes and coins make up less than 1% of Sweden's economy now. And it's ironic that they were the first European country to come up with modern banknotes in 1661, and now they don't have any, so to speak, pretty much. No cash signs are now the normal thing in shops across Sweden as payments go digital and mobile. But many Swedes want to take it to the next level and want to blend technology with the human body. Facebook, in partnership with major banks, payment processors, and e-commerce companies, has announced plans to launch a digital currency called Libra. Unlike decentralized, free-floating cryptocurrency, Libra will be tied to the national fiat currency, integrated into the financial system, and centrally managed. Critics warn Libra is akin to a spy coin. Many of the companies involved in Libra, including Facebook, routinely ban users on the basis of their political views. Big tech companies have boosted scores of individuals and groups of social platforms. They don't like what you're saying, they ban you. They cut you off. In the past, if credit cards and banks refused transactions because of something they disagreed with you about, you could simply revert back to cash. But with no physical currency, the bank marks you off and says you're not with us anymore. How are you going to buy anything? Checks, nowadays, paychecks are transferred straight to your bank account. The value. A mark of loyalty, allegiance to a government ruler. If you're not allegiance to him, you're not loyal to him, he can cut you off. If he doesn't like your political or religious stance, he can cut you off. This is exactly what's described in the book of Revelation. It's often referred to as that mark. We read about the mark of the beast. You don't have it, you don't buy. You don't buy gas, you don't buy groceries, you don't pay your utility bills, you pay your house payment? Nothing. And those who laugh at that and dismiss the book of Revelations, like I said earlier, maybe you should take a second look. They should, I should say. Because slowly but surely, we are also seeing our ability to conduct commerce becoming linked with our political or religious views. Guy asks the question, are we prepared for what will happen next? It's just not a fairy tale. It's just not something that's being made up, and it's totally ignored, if you notice, by the world. You don't see it in the news media. They just don't report on things they don't want to. What about violence? Another thing in the last days, and Paul warned Timothy about a perilous times. From crime in our cities to war-torn regions across the world, lawlessness is on the rise. Every minute, there are about 19.6 arrests made in the United States. Some say it's even more than that. Per second, they've gotten down to it. Some of these police shows, they'll tell you, like I think it's, what is it, every 2.5 seconds somebody is arrested. Opioids, pornography, alcoholism, socialism, racial tensions, economic disparity, synthetic drugs, and different attitudes and subjective reasoning have all contributed to increased lawlessness around the world, not just here. There is violence as well, because the West hasn't led that category as some of the nations in the world that are much more violent. But we're catching up. Last year in Charlotte, had over 100 murders. Have already started murders. Why is this? Because the government refused to deal with the lawlessness. Violence flourished across the Middle East, as we saw there. The more urbanized the world becomes, they say, the more lawless that it becomes. We have a global population pushing 7.6 billion people. Things are getting more chaotic by the day, just as it was in the days of Noah. In Genesis chapter 6, verse 11 and 12, it said, the earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. And Jesus himself said in Matthew 24:38, for as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating, drinking, marrying, and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark. A corrupt, totally corrupt society. What about unsolvable global issues? There's been a noticeable increase in seemingly unsolvable dilemmas around the world. From the ever-elusive threat of climate change, energy and water shortages, potential pandemics, and terrorism. In Luke 21:25 and 26, Jesus said, and there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. What about loss in this world of our freedom? Have you looked at the original Constitution lately and see the freedoms that we were guaranteed by that Constitution and see how many of those are gone? It's not realistic. There's a thing called the agenda for the coming one world government. It's called Agenda 21. Last year when we did the update, we talked about this. You remember? Now here's the definition: effective execution of Agenda 21 will require a profound reorientation of all human society. Unlike anything the world has ever experienced, a major shift in the priorities of both governments and individuals, and an unprecedented redeployment of human and financial resources. This shift will demand that a concern for the environmental consequences of every human action will be integrated into individual and collective decision making at every level. It's a comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally by organizations of the United Nations system of governments, in major groups in every area in which human impacts on the environment. So they're using this thing, they're going to use it for and cause people to fear that human beings are having adverse effects on our environment. Terrible effects. And this will give the secular world what it wants for the future. You heard of the three-legged stool, and some prophecy teachers have defined it as a central concept in Satan's upcoming time on the earth. During this time, God will unloose Satan, remember, where he will have free reign over the world the last 7 years, Great Tribulation period. Now, Satan's work, his thought, his agenda during this tribulation time is a one world government, a one world religion, and a one world currency. And you see Europe some years back came up with the euro dollar. One currency for all of Europe, what they want. Eventually they want one currency for the whole world. Pope Francis spoke in September of 2018 during ecumenical prayer in a Lutheran cathedral on Santa Maria in Riga, part of his apostolic journey to Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, those former, I guess, East Bloc countries. He said, "It is a great pleasure for me to meet with you in this land marked by a journey of recognition, cooperation, friendship between different Christian churches. We have succeeded in building unity while preserving the unique and rich identity of each. I might say that this is a lived ecumenism. That is one of Latvia's special traits. Without a doubt, it's a reason for hope and thanksgiving. Let's all come back together." The Jesuit priests have always had one mission, and that is that everybody will come back under the Catholic Church. Everybody. We read these things daily about Protestant and Roman Catholics coming together, Buddhist. The Pope a few years back had all these different religions come together for a conference. We're living in the very end times, and if this doesn't show people that, Christians I should say, then there's something wrong. United Nations organization, if you notice lately they want to have the World Court try our American soldiers for acts that they are doing. We don't recognize them, but still this court wants to bring our American soldiers in for doing things wrong because they're fighting for our country. That's kind of a summary of it in a nutshell. Now the UN says that they're for world peace, economic development, security, human rights, and the cessation of wars. Who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want to see that? The United Nations subsidiary organizations want to pay close attention to Agenda 21 program and the UN Wildlands Network. Everybody needs to pay close attention to what they're saying, talking about your freedoms. Look at some of the things we just talked about, how the freedom is disappearing. The Global Diversity Assessment and the Earth Charter are two other things that the UN is working on. And they state the purpose of these organizations, along with the wording of their charters, documents, and publications, are for the good of everyone. But the problem with that is they are the exact opposite of what the United States was founded on. They propagate the kind of world that the Antichrist will utilize to control the individual after the rapture. When the rapture happens, man, it's bad news for this earth. The Agenda 21 was signed by 179 nations of the UN in conference on environment and development in Rio de Janeiro back in 1992. Prepared by the UN Environment Program. They specified doomsday if we don't do something about our environment. And it's the cause of men, human beings living on the earth. They're the cause of it. They say they want to promote human health. They want to protect the atmosphere. We have a fragile ecosystem promoting agricultural crops. We want to do the right thing here. We want to strive for that. One man said, yeah, and the devil is in the details. And he said, look at some of the devils in the details here on this Agenda 21. It's drafted to create a sustainable society. What person wouldn't want to have a sustainable society? Now, one of the biggest things we see today, and if you can't get people to do things that you want them to do, then what you do is you create fear. You create a disaster, an impending disaster that's going to happen. Climate change, not global warming anymore because it didn't work. Those guys went on that ship up in Alaska and they got froze in, and they said all the ice was melting. Climate change sounded better. Unfortunately, it uses science that at a minimum has been manipulated, for the most part, purposely fabricated. Do you know that your children in school and your grandchildren are being taught that we're in such a crisis at climate change? They're starting with the little bitty ones because they can raise a society in that fear. The Effective Institute a Global Warming Conservation Plan, I should say, effectively, this institute wants to do this, says people must be led to believe that there is a global crisis facing the planet and that no one single government can address it on its own. So therefore, globally, we will do it. A global conservation plan. And you have heard about global warming. You hear people talking about it today. Now let me read you something that was recently presented to the UN. This was a letter from a group of 500 esteemed scientists and professionals in climate science. They officially notified the UN that there is no climate crisis and that spending trillions of dollars on a non-problem is cruel and imprudent. The letter won't make it to the news. Have you seen that letter on the news, the national news, world news? No. If these same scientists understood technology, they would change. What same scientists? The scientists that are saying there is a climate problem. They won't acknowledge it. They wrote this to Professor Gus Burkhout, The Hague, which is, he is part of the United Nations, Secretary General, United Nations headquarters. It was written to the head guy, Secretary General. And they said this, these scientists: Your Excellencies, there's no climate emergency. A global network of more than 500 knowledgeable and experienced scientists and professionals in climate-related fields have the honor to address your excellencies. Interesting how they're addressing those guys. The attached European Climate Declaration, for which the signatures to this letter are the national ambassadors. The general circulation models of climate on which international policy is at present founded are unfit for their purposes. Therefore, it is a cruel as well as imprudent to advocate squandering trillions of dollars on the basis of the results from such immature models. Current climate policies pointlessly, grievously undermine the economic system, putting lives at risk in countries denied access to affordable continuous electric power. Why? Because it's a climate problem. And they said, these scientists, we urge you to follow a climate policy based on sound science, realistic economics, and genuine concern for those who are harmed by costly but unnecessary attempts at mitigation. We ask you to place the declaration on the agenda of your imminent New York session. We also invite you to organize with us a constructive high-level meeting between world-class scientists on both sides of the climate debate early in 2020. The meeting will give effect to a sound and ancient principle, no less of sound science than of natural justice, that both sides should be fully and fairly heard. Please let us know your thoughts about such a joint meeting. The founder of Greenpeace, I don't know if you've ever heard of this guy. He was the former president of Greenpeace in Canada, Patrick Moore. He said that global warming and climate change, in an interview that he had, is a hoax and a scam. The founder of Greenpeace worked for the good of the environment. He said it's a hoax and a scam. He explained how fear and guilt are leveraged by proponents of climate change. Fear has been used all through the history to gain control of people's minds and wallets and all else. And the climate catastrophe is strictly a fear campaign. It is the biggest lie since people thought the earth was at the center of the universe. They did at one time. And this is what Galileo did. He said, that ain't true. The sun's at the center of the universe. They put him in prison, and we're going to kill him for it. The Catholic Church decided that about Galileo. They can get rid of this guy. And because he recanted what he said, he was allowed to live in house arrest for the rest of his life. No one wants to see our planet uninhabitable. None of us do. Global warming, climate change is something that these groups can use as a front to hide the real activity happening behind the scenes. Now understand this. All of this extravagant, this complex stuff they come up with, and they want to put fear in people, get them to follow. Satan's behind it. He's behind it. Ultimately, that's who's behind this. Scare people. Scare them into submitting to what you want them to do. Now also, the same regulation, and within it, is designed to severely limit water, electricity, transportation, and to remove our access to state parks and other things like that. You remember the Earth Charter? Have you ever heard of that? It's part of their agenda, part of this Agenda 21. The Earth Charter was launched in 2000, in case you didn't know, with the help of the former Soviet Union President Mikhail Gorbachev. The plan of it is to distribute the Earth Charter globally in schools and religious communities. And since 2000, the Charter has been formally endorsed by thousands of individuals, including numerous Catholic women religious orders. If you look close at the document, however, the underlying principles of atheistic and secular humanism and paganism and socialism and authoritarianism and other beliefs that are in direct conflict with Christianity and the Declaration of Independence as well as the Constitution of the United States. So what they're advocating is taking away the control, taking away the freedom of people. That has to happen for Satan to have his control, the Antichrist. Aren't you glad you're going to be raptured or go to be with the Lord before that? Gorbachev told Charlie Rose on his show on October 23rd, 1996, "The cosmos is my God, nature is my God." And this is a man that's behind all this, and in agreement with Agenda 21 and all that. Stephen Rockefeller stated, "No nation state can exist any longer as a separate island capable of providing in isolation opportunity and security for its people." So no nation. What is he? He wants the one world government. You remember last year we looked at the fact that they evidence of its intent to replace Christianity. This is at Agenda 21 and these other things. And all religions as the only religion, one religion. The Earth Charter is housed in the Ark of Hope. You remember I gave you a picture last year with that? Glass case, kind of made like the Ark of the Covenant. It's staves that go through those. He's even got the rings on the side and the staves go through it, but theirs are unicorn horns. It's intended to honor some of the world's spiritual alternatives to Christianity. Mother Earth, stuff like that. Now, look at the world, and there's this thing called the Global Diversity Assessment. Another one of their conferences that they did. The earth is extreme peril, they say. Humans have caused it, as I said earlier. Individual governments working on their own can't solve it anymore. So, we all need to come together. Over and over and over, that is stated. Now, you don't see it in the newspapers. You don't see a lot of news about it where people can comment on it and come back at it and say, hey, that's not true. Nothing is being said. Have you really read anything about all of this in the newspaper? I haven't. They have this thing called the UN Wildlands Network. Their objective is to fully implement 50% of the land in the United States would be deemed off limits to human beings. That means that a large part of the population would have to be relocated. There would be areas off limits to humans to live, and you could not farm, mine, cut trees, or anything like that. And a large part of what's left they want to take as buffer areas. So basically, in North America, you would have very little area for the human beings to live in. It'd all go back to nature, to the wild. It's unbelievable, excuse me, that people would think like that. But you see, Satan is so subtle. He guides these things over the centuries, and people don't even realize that he's guiding. He's the puppet master for the unsaved world. He's causing all these things because he wants them to come to that one world government so the Antichrist would be in charge. We see Russia, Turkey, and Iran recently did a major military operation close to Israel. They did one in 2018 also. Scripture tells us about the Roman Empire, the old Roman Empire coming back together again, being formed. The European Union is getting close to that. All those things. In Revelation 17:9, 2:13 it says, "And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are the 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. They have one mind, and shall give their power and their strength unto the beast." All these nations coming together will give their allegiance to the beast and the Antichrist. Revelations 13:1 said, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him power, and his seat and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as it was wounded to death. His deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like the beast, and who is able to make war?" Those things are not fairy tales. They're real. It's interesting to look at the Word of God and then just turn around and look at the times you're living in. The global government is coming. It's just a matter of time. It's coming. The UN has altered their original document. Trying to find they issued a document entitled "Transforming Our World: The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development." The document was 91 numbered sections, this new document. In the former document, they had like 1,200 pages. The revised document has 14,883. Why? Because they are getting more specific for the plan they have to lay it out. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Now, the question to us is, what about us? What should we be doing during this time? Should we be doing marches and things like that? Or should we be just waiting on the coming of the Lord and waiting for Him and serving Him while we're here? That's the whole point of what we're all about. Paul said in 1 Thessalonians 5:1, "But of the times and the season, brethren, you have no need that I write unto you, for yourselves know perfectly the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as they travail upon a woman with a child, and they shall not escape." We can't change these things that the unsaved world is doing. We can pray and seek the Lord on these matters. But our whole mission and purpose is to share about the Lord with others until He comes, and to keep an eye for the eternal, always focused there. Because the Lord is coming back. He's coming back in the rapture. He's coming back in the second coming, but He's coming back in the rapture first for His people. And we need to be aware of that. We need to keep that in mind. We don't have to panic. We don't have to get upset. I get upset at times in the news when I read people, some of the stuff they're saying, and just, come on. And I hear this voice once in a while. June goes, just give it to the Lord, maybe. Isn't that what you've been teaching us? Yeah, it is. It is. Puts my perspective back where it belongs, and yours as well. Keep it there. This is what Isaiah said. Isaiah 5:20. "Woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, that put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe unto them that are wise in their own eyes and prudent in their own sight. Woe unto them that are mighty to drink wine, and men of strength to mingle strong drink, which justifieth the wicked for reward, and take away the righteousness of the righteous from him. Woe unto them. That's a bad, heavy word. When Jesus said woe to the Pharisees, and when he says woe here, that's bad news. We don't have to worry about that. Keep our eyes on the Lord. Do what you're doing. Follow the Lord. Read his word each day. Pray. Talk with him every day. Stay close to the Lord, and he'll be close to you. Scripture says, draw near to God, and he'll draw near to you. That's what we are to be concerned about. No, we don't put our heads in the sand and I'm not just going to have anything to do. You vote. I vote. But understand the truth. You know the truth. You know why all these things are happening. So do I. Enough said, I think. Let's pray. Father, there's a lot to think about, a lot of information we looked at, but it's just to give, I think, an understanding of what's going on. And the real thing that tells us is the time is drawing near. Nearer and nearer. Every day we wake up, there's another day closer to heaven. And Lord, help us to keep the perspective you want us to have. And we can only get that in reading your word and praying and talking to you. Not looking at all these other things the world has out there. We can read about them, but we know that we filter all that stuff through your word. And if it's not telling us what your word is, then it's not true. Help us to pray, Lord God, to remember to pray for our country, our leaders, even though they're disobedient to you and unsaved. The first thing is to pray for their salvation and to pray for them to listen to you and do the right things. Help us, Lord, to keep that vigil and help us to understand my Lord is coming for me. Whether it be that I pass from this world before the rapture, so be it. But we are those that are remaining on earth will be raptured before this great time of tribulation. Yeah. And all the millions of people that don't know you, help us to pray for them. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you so much for your patience here this morning. I know that